a really big core principle of Lingofable is that we center on comprehensible input, having content that is at exactly the right level for you to be able to understand while also picking up some new words. And based on pedagogy, this is about 98% comprehensibility for kind of like the optimal learning experience. So you're understanding most of the text, but there are still a few new words here and there that you're able to pick up.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
Cornell students Megan Yap and Simon Ilincev introduce us to Lingofable, their new app offering language learning through stories.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. We're here today with Simon Ilincev and Megan Yap, two students studying computer science and linguistics here at Cornell.
They are currently collaborating on a language app called Lingofable, and we'll talk all about their development process and plans for the app.
Welcome to Speaking of Language, Megan and Simon.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on.
So we always like to start out by learning a little bit more about the background and path with languages of our guests. What does that look like for you? Simon, you want to get started?
Certainly. So I picked a really hard language to start with back over COVID during the pandemic in high school. Then I spent my time learning Mandarin Chinese, and I self-studied it. The reason I chose to learn it was because of an interest in the culture and history of China, but also out of a desire to read Chinese literature because I kind of got bored of English literature. It was too short for me. I read really fast, and China has serialized, mainland China especially, has serialized content online that's sort of just genre fantasy, genre fiction, but really fun to read. And so that was my end goal. And I spent probably 5 or 6 hours a day learning Chinese independently for a period of maybe a couple years. And managed to get to that point, kind of especially through comprehensible input by reading, short stories and watching kids shows. My little brother would come and join me watching Peppa Pig sometimes in the early days. So that was a bit of a shameful admission there. But eventually I kind of got more or less to fluency. I studied abroad in China and Hong Kong and passed the HSK6. And then since then, here at Cornell, I've been taking Persian. I took it for 3 semesters. Sadly, this semester, it's not really working out in terms of the schedule, but that was really interesting. And I also took Indonesian here, and I'm learning Spanish independently. And then I come from Prague. My dad's Czech, so I speak Czech as well, which I guess takes us to Megan.
Yeah, coincidentally, I'm actually learning Czech right now. But my first language that I learned was Mandarin, same as Simon. We both started around the pandemic. But for me, it was for slightly different reasons. I'm from Malaysia, and a lot of us speak Chinese there, so I'm ethnically Chinese, but was raised pretty much monolingual. In my household, the only language that we spoke was really English. And so I got into Chinese after taking a linguistics course by Johns Hopkins University, actually. So it was from that course that I kind of really realized how interesting language could be and how logical it was with all of the different kind of puzzle pieces fitting together.
Right.
So even though I previously didn't really have that much interest in kind of I guess, connecting with my heritage and learning Chinese, it was that experience that really caused me to want to get into it more and start pursuing the language properly. So I learned Chinese to about B1.5 over the course of the pandemic and a few years after that as well. And since then, I've been exploring a little bit with other East Asian languages. So a bit of Korean, a bit of Japanese, and now I'm studying Czech. It's a little bit different from what I have been learning in the past, but it's a really interesting challenge and super exciting to be learning that right now.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And beyond just languages, we also really like linguistics, kind of the subfield. We're both doing a minor in it. And we actually met back in sophomore fall in the Introduction to Linguistics class here at Cornell, Ling 1101. So so many interesting things about language, really.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, that brings us to Lingofable. Tell us, what is it and how did you start working on it together?
Yeah, so Lingofable is essentially a language learning app focused on learning language through stories. And so one problem that both Simon and I have faced in language learning is that we want to find content that is at our levels. So, as a learner, it's really hard to be reading native content. They're often very kind of like esoteric or very niche words that you don't know as a learner. But at the same time, graded readers, kids' books, all of that stuff is also, it can be really boring.
Sure.
And kids' content is actually quite difficult, as I've come to realize. So I tried listening to Peppa Pig as well when I was learning Chinese. But there's a lot of random words that kids pick up that, like an average adult speaker would not really encounter on a daily basis. Kids reading about fantasy might see volcano or something strange like that, right? But those words don't really turn up in real life. And so we wanted to be able to provide a platform where learners can find stories that are genuinely interesting for them and the genres that they're really actually wanting to read, as well as being at the correct level. So kind of hinging off of this as well, a really big core principle of Lingofable is that we center on comprehensible input. So for those who are not so familiar with the concept, essentially, it's kind of having content that is at exactly the right level for you to be able to understand while also picking up some new words. And based on pedagogy, this is about 98% comprehensibility for kind of the optimal learning experience. So you're understanding most of the text, but there are still a few new words here and there that you're able to pick up. And all of the stories that we have on Lingofable are kind of centered around this range of what fits your comprehensibility level in the best way to help you learn.
Yeah, so the way we accomplish that is by kind of pre-generating or just filling out, getting a bunch of stories. We I think have about 1,000 on the platform right now,
Wow.
But going to be adding more over the coming days and weeks, especially for other languages. We're starting with Spanish, but I'm selfishly wanting it for Persian and Megan for Czech. And by using some computer science techniques like some natural language processing, lemmatization, and so forth on the words, as well as modeling user vocabulary. And these are all aligned to kind of CFR levels. So this is a bit of a more European framework, unfortunately, for our American listeners. But by using that, then we can kind of present each user with that 98% comprehensibility story or stories, as well as, some level boosters or light reads, just to get into kind of how that works. I know there are graded readers and so forth online, but these are A, limited in number, and B, they're also kind of written very discreetly. You might have an A1 graded reader, B1 graded reader, and so forth. It's very kind of few and discrete buckets, whereas our range of stories means that there's always, hopefully, something for you.
That's great. So what makes Lingofable different from other language apps like Babbel or Duolingo?
Yeah, I think the main difference for Lingofable is that we're really able to get an accurate sense of your vocabulary. So with apps such as Babbel or Duolingo, as you're mentioning, they aren't able to adapt to your vocabulary in as much precision as we are able to. And because we know exactly which words you're kind of reading and seeing in each of these stories, which words you've tapped on, perhaps because you don't know the definition of, every single story that we give you is kind of perfectly at your level. Whereas Duolingo, a lot of what they do is kind of giving you words that are not necessarily in context or are kind of just not related to daily life or whatever it is that you're actually kind of experiencing or going through. So I think one thing Duolingo is well known for is giving these kinds of random sentences to users that are really funny to help you remember things, right? But they're not super practical in terms of real life application. And for Lingofable, we're able to combine those two approaches, knowing your vocabulary so well and being able to place those words in context for you in a genuinely interesting situation. And that really helps us, I think, differentiate from what is already out there.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think that personally, these existing apps that you mentioned, like Babbel or Duolingo, they're very kind of output focused usually and very active, whereas and also geared towards even the very lowest levels of learners, very beginning learners. Whereas with Lingofable, you need to have some maybe set a few hundred words you already know, right? We can't like teach the language from scratch, but it's a very good supplemental, even main resource because the stories have like audio as well that you can listen to on the go. I was learning Chinese through an app called Do Chinese that has a sort of similar principle, and I found that like just having these bite-sized stories was extremely helpful. But we're more input focused, right? Like you get the audio practice, the listening practice, and the reading practice, and then we mesh well with SRS apps. So all the vocabulary that we know about the user can be exported to Anki, say, or to other flashcard apps. And so it's focused on the more kind of pedagogical, if less immediately obvious ways to learn a language, aka via comprehensible input and then like spaced repetition.
Nice.
Very cool. So since Lingofable is all about language learning through stories, tell us a little more about what it is about stories and storytelling and narrative that is so helpful for learning language.
Thank you. I'd love to take that question. I actually am an author myself, so the reason why I enjoyed reading so much in English and went on to Chinese was because I actually published a fantasy series in high school. It's self-published. It's not the best prose. I think I sold a few hundred copies. And
that's amazing.
All the young adults really liked it, but looking back, it's a bit of an embarrassment. So I'm working on something new right now, post-apocalyptic literary thriller. But point being that I think, humans, as is evidenced by, the wealth of movies and shows and novels and so forth, are very receptive to stories, right? It's kind of how we go about thinking of our
so
own,
cool.
journey through time and so forth. You'd always have like the storytellers of like ancient Greece or pre-literate societies with all their audience crowded around the fire listening to them. And so many of my friends here are too cerebral to be reading fiction anymore. They're just like looking at philosophy or some self-improvement books. But I think that the vast majority of individuals, and even these very cerebral individuals, hopefully still have a chance for listening to stories and kind of putting themselves in the footsteps or the shoes of some character, and encountering challenges and so forth, just like we do in our own lives.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. So, Megan, you already mentioned this a little bit, but on your website, you show some examples of the difference between 98% comprehensibility and 95% comprehensibility. Can you explain that to our listeners? Is that gap really so big? Is there a gap between 95 and 98?
Yeah, so even though it may seem like a really small difference in percentage, the kind of feeling that you get when you're reading a text that is 98% comprehensible versus 95% comprehensible, it's super different as a language learner. And listeners can go onto our website, lingofable.com, to see a kind of example of how this works. But as a language learner, it's already a lot of friction for you to be reading in a language that is not familiar to you.
Right.
It's difficult to even read in like English a lot of the time. And so we want it to be at the kind of stage where it's comfortable reading. You're not kind of like having to force yourself to take part in this like massive ordeal.
Right.
But you're also still learning in a way that is meaningful and that is kind of just enough to see those words in your brain and give you the opportunity to absorb the meaning without being overwhelmed by all of this. And we're still kind of figuring out where, like what kind of percentage and what kind of range is the best for our readers, especially since we have kind of different methods for figuring out like the lemmas that they know and the different words that they know and practice. But we really want to center around this kind of like 95 to 98% comprehensibility for the best amount of learning and the best amount of comfortability with reading.
Nice. Yep.
Tell us about some other unexpected discoveries, lessons, challenges you've run into while developing Lingofable.
We might need a minute for that. So one thing apart from just the technical side of wiring it all up together, I mean, this is over 100,000 lines of code, so we've been really hard at work. 1 to 2 all-nighters a week sometimes. Then I think that trying to find the lemmas and really define what a lemma even is, aka like the root or stem of a word, was difficult, especially for Spanish, since it's such an inflected language. So for English, if we have like ran, then it's getting run from that, or runner, run. It's like it's pretty trivial. But Spanish is a lot more complex in this regard, and the existing technical tools to parse this out Stanford has some tools which are like rule-based, and then we are considering using like large language models as well, which suffer from not being deterministic. We can't guarantee they'll give the same result each time. And so there was a lot of experimentation in terms of kind of testing different existing open source models and kind of large language models to see which ones would give us the best lemmas, the most accurate lemmas. And we like backtested this with a few example users to see, what kind of percentages that might give. And so, like Megan hinted at, then our current solution is still imperfect. I don't think that without, having maybe native speakers tag everything, then we can achieve a complete, perfect automated lemma extraction. But that was definitely a challenge, just trying to figure out, how to go about defining what a lemma is. Maybe we added in some additional rules on top of our pipeline to further kind of parse those lemmas, or in the case of, let's say, proper nouns, then dump those all as like one proper noun lemma so that they don't then cause the story comprehensibility to decrease too much. So that was, I think, like one of the major challenges for me. But there's certainly been quite a few.
Yeah, I think on the non-technical side as well, it's also been really interesting figuring out how to get our users to actually, use the app and want to be engaged. Right, you might have the perfect kind of story database running in the background, but if users aren't interested in the content and you're not kind of regularly reminding them to come back and read, there's no point, because they're just not going to use the app. They're not going to engage with this thing that you've created. So we've been experimenting a lot as well with kind of the delivery of notifications, for instance, like how often we notify our users, like the different kinds of notifications we can send them, like even the copy for the tone in which we deliver these messages. And kind of just going back to the different fables that we were talking about offering in our app as well, we realized that a lot of users, what they like to read is not necessarily fiction, but social media posts. So a lot of people don't read so much anymore. They might not, be going to the library and taking out a book or reading online. But they might be scrolling a lot on social media. And so you don't really have a lot of textual content on social media platforms such as Instagram or YouTube, for instance. But platforms like Reddit have a lot of users scrolling and reading all of those posts. So because of that, we decided to try exploring a different medium. And we're okay, what about introducing an Am I the Jerk style kind of written post? So this is the kind of thing that you actually get hooked on reading. My mom is telling me all the time about all of the different subreddits that she's scrolling through on Reddit. And so we decided to, try something a little bit different, see if users like this instead. And actually some of the beta testing feedback we got was that users really liked these stories. It's very different from usual.
Sure, yeah. So you're already speaking a little bit to this next question, but what are your hopes for the future of Lingofable, both short-term and bigger picture? And I'm also curious, what are your own future plans? Are you going to stick with developing language apps? I hope both of you will continue to learn all the languages, but what does the future hold for Lingofable and the two of you?
Hopefully the future includes Czech for Lingofable.
And Persian, yeah.
And German, I mean.
Any requests, Sam?
I'll think about that. I'm always, I was going to say I'm always trying to brush up on my French, but I mean, I'm sure there would be a demographic for Klingon.
So I think it's still a little bit uncertain, right? We just are launching, right? We did launch in March, and so it's still in the very early stages, so we have a lot of conviction in the app. We both have jobs on the West Coast lined up at Google, so that's kind of hard to say no to. We're considering dropping out even and going to work on this full time, getting some funding. But I think that the most rational solution is our most rational approach is to see kind of where things go and really go all in on distribution and trying to promote it. We got some grants from the contribution project that Cornell sponsors, and so we might use that for some ads and so forth. But certainly the hardest part is getting the stories and developing it. And so now that we have that, then we certainly intend to at least keep it online, and we'll be adding lots more languages too. It's really dependent on the feedback we get, but we're going to be iterating on stuff and doing our very best to make sure that this comes up in people's minds alongside Duolingo or Babbel.
There you go. I like it.
I think in the future as well, we were thinking about eventually adding some kind of interactability to our stories. So interactive stories in some way. That's currently not feasible for us to implement since we only have such limited time and we are full-time students. But if we were to spend more time on this, if we had the opportunity to dedicate more to it, I think we would really love to explore kind of expanding beyond the passive kind of just reading a story approach to this.
Choose your own adventure.
I was going to say, is that okay?
I love those stories.
Me too. And I was about to say the same thing, and then it really occurred to me, like, is that going to show my
Yeah,
age?
I know.
Is
That's
that still a
okay.
thing?
That's okay. We own that, Sam.
Okay. Cool. Choose your own adventure.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm into that. You can take that or leave it.
Yeah, we'll let you know when it comes out then.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
please.
Where can our listeners find out more about Lingofable, and how can they get involved if they'd like to check it out?
Yeah, so you can find Lingofable on both the App Store as well as the Google Play Store, as well as at our website, lingofable.com. And we're always looking for more people to talk to, anyone who's interested in kind of the whole premise behind the app, if they just want to, reach out. We're reachable at team@lingofable.com. Yeah, Simon, anything?
Yeah, I mean, we encourage you to give it a go. All right, I think we just have Spanish at the time of this recording, but it'll be updated soon with French, maybe not Klingon yet. And so any feedback is good feedback, right? I think that we're very attached to the idea and very biased from working on it for so long. So it's always good to get an external perspective. But the initial feedback that we have been getting from our early users has been really positive. And so hopefully you could echo that. And then otherwise as well, like we're interested in kind of improving the pedagogy of this. We did read, lots of papers and so forth on questions comprehensible input and whatnot. But obviously just being students doing a linguistics minor, then there's a whole world we don't know about still. And especially as we kind of look towards maybe making it more interactive or, for example, one thing I'll mention is that we just model your vocabulary alone. We don't really align the stories super closely with, let's say, like grammar content. We don't like pull that out and mark it. And so we're looking into making them maybe better aligned in that sense across, more comprehensive aspects of a user's level and so forth. So yeah, if you have any thoughts on how to kind of improve that, then we'd be all ears. But main thing is just give it a go. The hardest part, I think, for apps especially is the friction. And it's not like a website where you just open it up. You got to go to your phone, download it, wait 30 seconds. And so every download, and especially every 5-star, I hopefully rate.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, absolutely. Well, listeners, go to your place for downloading apps, download Lingofable, and give it a 5-star review for sure. Well, it's amazing to hear about this wonderful work that you guys have been spending a lot of time on, and we are very excited to see where Lingofable is taking all of us. Before we sign off, we'd like to ask each of you for a word in a language that you love, are learning, may want to learn, that makes you feel inspired. What is that word?
So my word would be a Chinese idiom. It's 超凡入圣, which means to transcend the ordinary and enter the divine. So it's from all my Chinese web novels I've been reading.
Okay.
But Chinese is very rich in these so-called idioms or chongyu. And this is one of my favorite ones because not only does it mean this kind of very fancy, flowery, divine, immortal thing, but also it indicates or points towards masters of their craft, or like you're so good that you're in like your own realm. And so I really like kind of diving deep into different domains, whether it be like language app development or language learning or writing. And so hopefully I can 超凡入圣 over the course of the next few years and some new things. But
there you go. I love that.
Mine.
And here you see the difference between Simon and I, because the word that I picked is otskochitsu, which means to go to the bathroom in Czech, actually. So I picked this slightly funny word because it doesn't literally mean going to the bathroom. It's something more along the line of stepping out quickly. And I find it really interesting how the way native speakers use language is so different from how a learner might interpret things. And there's always so many different nuances to language that, it just really takes you a lot of time to get to know that language to figure out. So that inspires me. I think there's a lot more to learn and a lot more space to grow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Fantastic. Well, this has been such a treat. Thank you for sharing everything you've been working on with Lingofable, and thank you for speaking of language with us, Megan and Simon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us here today.
Next week, we will hear from our LRC signature speaker, Dr. Leanne Spino. She will give a talk tomorrow, March 26th, on advancing second language proficiency and intercultural competence in post-secondary education, which you can catch live at the LRC or on Zoom.
Or you can tune in next week to hear more about her thoughts on possible strategies for demonstrating and communicating the value of language programs. Until then,
Auf Wiederhören!
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu.
And follow Cornell LRC on Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelika Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.